Привit moi druzy. Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. I'm a professor who tries to help you make some sense and provide some context about what's going on in the war in Ukraine. Today, I want to talk about the biggest story that's going on right now, and that is the documents leak from the Pentagon and what it all means. Now, if you have been paying attention, if you're like me and you watch other channels and you try to read the news and inform yourself, you might have run across Gerdes. He did a really good job with this yesterday. Jake Bro did a good job as well. I want you to listen to just a minute of Gerdes at Ukraine Matters.
It's just a bunch of numbers and statistics that are compared to each other. So first number here is the number that describes that Russia has in total 544 battalions in total, all of their Russian forces, of which 527 battalions are engaged on territory, are engaged with the conflict on Ukraine, and 474 battalions are right now located on territory of Ukraine. So now you heard battalion, 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 battalion. What does it mean? Well, it means that Russia has about 170,000 of forces that are located on territory of Ukraine. They have some reserves on territory of Russia, and the most important thing, Russia has engaged 97% of their forces. I wonder if you have heard the number Russia has engaged 97% somewhere before. And I'm going to hint you, it was the Pentagon briefing. It was the Pentagon briefing where they said that Russia has engaged 97% of their total army into the conflict with Ukraine. We just get a little bit more detailed breakdown.
Okay, so the upside of that is that, so what this leak has done for us is just simply confirm what we've already heard publicly, and so that's what you need to hear from Gerdes. He goes on and masterfully goes through document after document after document. I'll leave a link to this in the pinned comments below. Please go watch Gerdes if you want more after I'm done. Okay, now, there's also Jake Bro, who's done a really good job with that as well. And Jake has experience handling secret documents. When he was in the Air Force, he dealt with secret and top secret documents regularly, and so he gives some context as well. Yesterday, what I talked about with the Pentagon leak update was simply that the fudge numbers, like you heard, and Gerdes talks about this as well. So if you go back to him, the fudge numbers about that Russia has only lost 16,500 or something, as opposed to this huge number that Ukraine has lost, that just muddies the waters and helps us not be able to believe whatever's out there, and it's not useful. But what I want to talk about is I want to go into all the articles that might be helpful. So I'm going back to April 8th. Okay, so here's the first thing. The Department of Justice opens an investigation into leaks of apparent classified U.S. military documents. Okay, the Pentagon said on Thursday it was looking into the matter. Officials are rattled. They should be rattled because this is a big deal. It really is a big deal. U.S. officials suggested that the leak in investigation would look inward at potential culprits inside the Pentagon, but a person familiar with U.S. intelligence said a probe would not likely be limited just to the Pentagon. Now, how many people are they going to be able to look at? Like, who has access? I will answer that by the end of this video. How many people have access to this kind of information, and it will blow your mind. Okay. One last thing in this article, no one noticed. The blank was sitting on a Minecraft Discord server for a month, and no one noticed. A researcher at the investigative outlet Bellingcat, who traced the timeline of the posted documents, told CNN it was a Minecraft server, and that's really kind of mind-numbing. I read the Bellingcat article, and most of what I say is going to be covered in these press articles, and I'm using Western media outlets, legitimate, that wouldn't print crap because they have a reputation to uphold. Okay, now here's Politico. U.S. in crisis mode with allies after a Ukraine intel leak. Yeah, we want to know, like, if this kind of thing happens, what else has been spilled? And so this is going to create distrust. It's going to be a bad thing between us and our allies. And this is April 10th. Okay, let me scroll down to a highlighted bit here. Ukraine has long worried about information it shares with the U.S. spilling out into the open. This case showed that the Ukrainians have been absolutely right about that. Now, what's the alternative, though? The alternative is keeping it so close to your chest that you can't actually share information and be able. So there's a tension here between keeping it all to yourself, and you know that that's bad because you can't get help, or sharing it. But there's got to be a happy middle ground of where you can share in a secure kind of way. The Americans now owe the Ukrainians. They have to apologize and compensate. Now remember, this is an effort that the U.S. has repeatedly said hinges on collaboration among allies in NATO, Europe, and elsewhere. That's right. And there's a big tent of nations that are working to support Ukraine in solidarity. And so it's possible that something can spill out. And that is, when you see the number, you'll be fascinated by this. But the amount of people just in the U.S. alone that could have spilled this is absolutely incredible. More than 100 U.S. intelligence documents were posted on Discord, a secure messaging app, as early as March 2nd, and we're just finding this out within the last few days. It's still unclear the extent to which the documents have been altered and by whom. And I talked about the altering yesterday. And so you have to take some of these things with a grain of salt. At least one paper appears to have been altered to show significantly inflated Ukrainian death tolls. It's actually kind of doing the opposite, showing much lower Russian death tolls than Ukrainian. It's unclear the extent to which the U.S. will alter its intelligence sharing on the Ukraine war in the days and weeks ahead. But again, if you don't share, then you have a whole different problem set. Okay, next article. This is The Guardian in the UK. It's just the tip of the iceberg, this trove of material that has started circulating long before it was widely noticed. It includes details about Ukraine's lack of ammunition. That's a problem. U.S. intelligence collection methods used against Russia, and embarrassing evidence pointing to a U.S. spying on allies such as Ukraine, South Korea, and Israel. Now look, we spy on everybody, they all spy on us, but it's still disconcerting to see this made public. One of the documents dated 23 February of this year and marked secret outlines. Now there's like a classified, and then there's a second rate of classified, which is secret, and then there's top secret, right? So secret's kind of a middle range. Jake Bro talked about that. Now, one of the documents dated 23 February of this year and marked secret outlines in detail how Ukraine's Soviet-era S-300 air defense systems would be depleted by the 2nd of May at the current rate of usage. This isn't the kind of thing that you want the enemy to know that is actually where they are, right? The investigative journalism group Bellingcat traced the leak back through a series of channels used by different internet communities, mostly involving teenagers with interests ranging from military gear, Orthodox Christianity, music, and video games, all using Discord. That's where these were put. They weren't just sent out to some journalist somewhere. Several Discord users told Bellingcat that the original source of the leak was a server used by only 20 people. Of the sources and the first leaks on Thug Shaker Central, and then within that set up a channel within Thug Shaker Central called Bear versus Pig about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Terrible name, but okay. And a teenager who went by the name of Luca started posting 107 of the photographed documents on a more widely used server. So that's how it got out there, was like photos of these documents. We don't know how they got the documents, and then they were put out there on social media. A few days later, a user reposted 10 of the pictures on a Discord server for players of the Minecraft video game. They remained there apparently unnoticed for a month. On Telegram, part of one of the documents about Ukraine was doctored to inflate the Ukrainian casualties and diminish Russian casualties. And that's what I was talking about yesterday, which it breeds insecurity about, well, what are the actual numbers and why? But it also was something that Russians would be able to use as some kind of propaganda piece. Okay, Times of Israel also had something to say here because Israel was invoked in this process. Intel leak: U.S. believes Israel can be pressured to supply lethal arms to Ukraine. Okay, so Israel said there's a document entitled Israel Pathway to Providing Lethal Aid to Ukraine, which may have been altered or used as part of a misinformation campaign, or it may be legitimate. So here's what's going on. CNN, which said Jerusalem will likely consider providing lethal aid under increased U.S. pressure or a perceived degradation in its relationship with Russia. Like, how do we get them to actually help Ukraine? That's what the document's dealing with. One major reason for Israel's hesitance appears to be its strategic need to maintain freedom of operations in Syria, where Russian forces largely control the airspace. So remember, every nation has its own agenda. They have their own perspective, and this is what they're trying to do when building a coalition is line up people with the same kind of of agenda and perspective in order to unite them. And this could be, well, this isn't a good look, right? So Israel's not doing nothing. Israel's actually been involved. There's actually been a recent shift in Israel's stance with a decision for the first time to authorize the sale of defensive military equipment to Kyiv. Why did that happen? Well, they were providing humanitarian aid, but then the Russians sent thousands of Iranian-made suicide drones to attack targets across Ukraine. And that raised the ire of the Israelis, who see Iran as their sworn enemy. Okay, finally, as the war progresses, Israel has increasingly insisted that it is in fact on Ukraine's side, and they have provided over $22.5 million in humanitarian aid. Now, that's nothing to turn your nose at. It's not billion, but it's still nothing to turn your nose at, and they're actually trying to help, and they're on Ukraine's side. But the idea that they've been, having their arm twisted behind the scenes is kind of a bad look, and that's part of the problem with this intel dump. Just a couple of things from this article from the document. Pentagon leaks U.S. seeks to mend ties after claims that Washington spied on key allies, and we talked about that a little bit before. Washington had been spying on friendly countries, including South Korea and Israel. The disclosure of highly classified material represents Washington's worst national security breach in many years. One of the latest leaks claims that Egypt was planning to covertly supply Russia with rockets and other munitions, although the U.S. Was said to believe that the plan had never been carried out. So at least, if nothing else, Egypt's been put on notice, hey, we're paying attention. But this kind of thing is just a bad look all the way around. And here's another article from the BBC. The Pentagon leak shows South Korea torn on sending Ukraine weapons. And so this article is talking about how South Korea really did not want to send weapons. They have, culturally, they don't want to send weapons to a nation that's within the war, but they also tend to align with the West. They're essentially a Western NATO-like country that happens to be positioned on the Pacific. And so they are fundamentally in alignment with most of Europe on this kind of thing, but they're feeling like their arms are being a bit twisted. And so this is just a bad look every way you cut it. In fact, it gets worse. Here's RT. U.S. allies seek censorship of Pentagon leak, says Politico. Essentially, the facts are largely correct, but it's a bad look, and RT is going to make hay out of this. Okay, next article, also from The Guardian. I just want to highlight just one little bit in this. Latest leak highlights how many have access to U.S. top-secret material. Just one little quote here that I want to show you. According to the most recent figures published by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, there were 1.25 million people with the clearance and access to read top-secret material in the U.S. government in 2019. I don't know what the official figure is now, but I'm sure it hasn't changed all that much. So you could be looking for one of a million Americans, let alone anyone in any of our partner countries who were involved with that. Now, why does this matter? Because anytime you have a leak like this or something like this, it creates this instability between the partners, and it will always reflect badly on the administration. So even though Biden had nothing to do with this, this will go down in history books as the leak during the Biden administration, not in the intelligence department and the subunit within that department and whatever else. It's going to reflect on the administration itself. Now, I haven't focused on troop movements or the number of troops on the ground or the number of casualties or anything, because I'm trying to look at the bigger picture, like who's affected. When you have a leak like this, it can send shockwaves through your allies. But can we trust you? How can we trust you? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? How do we make sure that the enemy doesn't know what's about to happen? And that's an important thing. But if you are interested in trying to understand the numbers, the troop strength, those kind of things, please go watch Georgie if you want to understand how sensitive information is handled and the kinds of things that have been talked about there. Please go watch Jake Bro. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thumbs up in advance if you like this. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the coffees. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.